My cousin steals all my boyfriends just for fun, only to tell the whole family that they're no good and that she's more of a woman than me. Before continuing the story, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you won't miss more stories, and leave your like on the video. My cousin has always been like this. Ever since we were kids, she had this sick need to prove she was better than me at everything. But what hurt me most was her specialty: stealing my boyfriends. It wasn't for love or passion. It was pure entertainment. She'd seduce them, play with them for a few weeks, then discard them like broken toys. And in the end, in front of the whole family, she'd proclaim they weren't worth it anyway, and that I needed more self-esteem to get real men. This time would be different. It had to be. Oliver and I had been together for 6 months, the longest relationship I'd ever maintained. He was everything my family always wanted me to achieve: successful, handsome, educated. He worked at a consulting firm and had ambitious plans for the future. "Are you bringing him to Sunday dinner?" my mother asked over the phone, with that excitement she only showed when it came to something she could show off. "I'm still thinking about it," I replied, already knowing what was coming. "Honey, you can't keep hiding him forever. Your cousin will be there and she's been asking about him. She's doing so well after her divorce, you know. The settlement left her very comfortable and she has such an active social life." There it was. The comparison. My successful divorced cousin who lived luxuriously off her ex-husband's alimony while dating different men every week. The golden standard I could never reach. "I know, Mom. She just wants to meet him. She's family, Zoe. What harm could it do?" What harm? She'd systematically destroyed every relationship I'd had since high school. The pattern was always the same. She'd show interest, use her charm and experience to seduce them, make them feel like they were missing out by being with boring little me, then dump them and tell everyone how they weren't good enough for our family anyway. But I'd learned from past mistakes. This time, I'd prepared Oliver from the beginning. I'd told him about her methods, her pattern, her need to prove her superiority. I'd asked him to reject any attempts at contact on social media, to keep his distance, to remember that she wasn't interested in him as a person, just as another trophy to steal from me. "I'll tell her all about him when I see her," Oliver had said, laughing when I first explained the situation. "Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere." He thought it was funny, a family quirk. He had no idea what he was up against. My cousin had perfected her technique over the years. She knew exactly how to make a man feel special, desired, like he was settling for less. She'd start with social media, casual likes, then comments, then private messages. She'd find common interests, shared experiences, reasons they should meet for coffee just as family. But Oliver had been strong so far. He'd shown me every friend request she'd sent using different fake accounts on Snapchat. Every single one rejected. Every attempt to connect blocked immediately. "She's persistent," he'd said after the 5th fake account attempt. But also kind of pathetic. Don't you think? I wanted to believe he was immune. I wanted to believe that this time would be different, that I'd finally found someone who wouldn't fall for her games. The problem was my mother. In her excitement to show off my new boyfriend, she'd let slip our address during one of her conversations with my aunt. And my cousin, being who she was, saw that as an invitation. I should have known she'd find a way to get to him directly. The doorbell rang on a Tuesday afternoon when I was at work. Oliver was home taking calls for his consulting project when my cousin decided to make her move. "Someone's here to see you," he texted me. "Says she's your cousin?" My stomach dropped. "Don't let her in," I typed back frantically. "I'm serious. Just tell her I'm not home and you're busy." Too late. She's already inside. Says your mom gave her our address because she wanted to drop off something for you. Of course she did. My cousin had probably spun some story about a family heirloom or a birthday gift that couldn't wait. My mother, in her endless need to facilitate family connections, had practically rolled out the red carpet. I called Oliver immediately. "Get her out of there. Now. Relax, Zoe. She seems nice enough. We're just talking." That's exactly what I'm worried about. But Oliver had already hung up. For the next 3 hours, I sat at my desk, unable to concentrate on anything except what was happening in my apartment. I'd spent months preparing him for this moment, explaining her tactics, warning him about her methods. Yet here she was, in our space, working her magic while I was trapped 20 miles away in downtown traffic. When I finally got home, I found them sitting on opposite ends of our couch, both scrolling through their phones in what appeared to be comfortable silence. My cousin looked up with that innocent smile she'd perfected over the years. "Zoe, finally! I was just telling Oliver about the family cookbook Mom wanted me to give you. She held up a slim recipe book that I knew had been gathering dust in my aunt's kitchen for years. Oliver looked up from his phone, and I could see the irritation in his eyes. Good. That was good. She's been here for 3 hours, he said flatly. I kept telling her you weren't home, but she insisted on waiting. I just wanted to make sure you got this, my cousin said sweetly. And I thought it would be nice to finally meet the man who's made you so happy. The way she said happy made it sound like a temporary condition she could easily remedy. Well, now you've met him, I said, taking the cookbook. Thanks for bringing this by. She didn't move. Instead, she turned back to Oliver with renewed interest. I was just telling him about the business opportunities in this area. My ex-husband has connections all over the state, and I know Oliver's looking to expand his consulting work. My blood ran cold. She'd found his weakness, his ambition. In 3 hours, she'd managed to identify exactly what mattered most to him professionally and positioned herself as the key to his success. That's really not necessary, I said quickly. Oh, but it is, she continued, her eyes never leaving Oliver's face. A talented man like this shouldn't be limited to local clients. I could make some calls. Oliver looked interested despite himself. What kind of connections? Major corporations, government contracts, international firms. The kind of clients that could set you up for life. I watched as the seeds of temptation were planted. This was how she always started. Not with flirtation, but with opportunity. She made herself indispensable first, seductive second. I should probably get going, she finally said, standing up gracefully. But Oliver, would you mind if I added you on social media? I'd love to share some of those contacts I mentioned. This was it. The moment I'd been preparing for. Oliver looked at me, then back at her, clearly torn between the professional opportunity and the promises he'd made to me. I don't really use social media for business, he said carefully. Oh, but everyone does these days. It's the only way to network effectively. She pulled out her phone. Just add me on one platform. I promise I won't spam you with cat videos. She laughed at her own joke, and I saw Oliver's resolve wavering. The 3-hour conversation had worn him down, and the promise of career advancement was too tempting to ignore. I guess just on LinkedIn would be okay, he said finally. My heart sank. It was such a small concession, but I knew it was the first crack in the wall. She'd gotten her foot in the door. Within a week, my cousin had become Oliver's unofficial business advisor. It started innocently enough. A LinkedIn message about a potential client, a shared article about industry trends. But soon, Oliver was mentioning her in conversations daily. Your cousin thinks I should consider expanding to the West Coast? She sent me this article about government contracting that's really interesting. Did you know she has an MBA from a top-tier school? Of course she did. My cousin collected credentials the way other people collected stamps. Not because she was passionate about them, but because they made her more impressive to her targets. The breaking point came during dinner at my parents' house 2 weeks later. Oliver had been reluctant to go, claiming work stress, but my mother had insisted. She wanted to show him off to the extended family, and my cousin would obviously be there. Oliver, my cousin exclaimed when we walked in, as if she hadn't been texting him daily. I was just telling Uncle Pete about your expansion plans. My father looked impressed. Expansion plans? It's just an idea, Oliver said modestly, but I could see he was pleased by the attention. Oh, it's much more than that, my cousin continued. I've already reached out to 3 potential investors from my network. Oliver, did you get my message about the meeting next week? Meeting? This was the first I'd heard of any meeting. What meeting? I asked. Just a casual introduction, my cousin said smoothly. Nothing formal, but when opportunity knocks. She let the sentence hang in the air while the whole family looked at Oliver with new respect. Here was someone who was making things happen, taking action, building something bigger than himself, and my cousin was the one making it possible. After dinner, I cornered Oliver in the parking lot. Since when are you having business meetings with my cousin? It's not like that, Zoe. She's just trying to help. Help with what? Exactly. You've been doing fine on your own. Fine isn't enough anymore. The market is changing, and if I don't adapt, I'll get left behind. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. Look, I know you have issues with your cousin, but this is business. Personal feelings can't interfere with professional opportunities. Personal feelings? She systematically destroyed every relationship I've ever had. Maybe those guys just weren't strong enough to resist temptation, he said coldly. Maybe they were looking for an excuse to leave anyway. The words hit me like a slap. This was exactly what she did. She made them question not just their relationship with me, but me as a person. She made them feel like they were settling, like they deserved better, like I was holding them back. So that's what you think? That I'm holding you back? Oliver's expression softened slightly. No, that's not what I meant. I think you're being paranoid. Your cousin has been nothing but professional with me. Professional. That's how she always started. Pure business, legitimate opportunities, mutual benefit. The seduction came later, so gradually that her targets never saw it coming. Over the next few days, Oliver became increasingly absent. He was either at meetings she'd arranged, on calls with her contacts, or researching markets she'd suggested. When he was home, he was distracted, constantly checking his phone for her messages. She thinks I should consider opening a satellite office in Denver, he told me one evening, not looking up from his laptop. Denver? Since when do you want to live in Denver? It's not about living there. It's about market penetration, establishing a regional presence. He was using language I'd never heard from him before, business jargon that sounded like it came straight from my cousin's mouth. Oliver, do you realize you've talked more about business with my cousin in 2 weeks than you've talked about anything with me? He finally looked up. That's not true. When's the last time we had dinner together? When's the last time we watched a movie or went for a walk or had a conversation about something other than your expansion plans? He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. He couldn't remember either. This is exactly what she does, I said quietly. She finds what matters most to you and makes herself essential to it. It's not about business, Oliver. It's about control. You're being ridiculous, he said, but there was less conviction in his voice than before. That night, I lay awake listening to him type messages on his phone. Even in the dark, I could see the glow of the screen, could hear the soft ping of incoming texts. I didn't need to look to know who he was talking to. My cousin had found her way in. The first real breach came during what was supposed to be a romantic dinner. Oliver had suggested we try the new Italian place downtown, our first real date in weeks. I was hopeful, thinking maybe he was finally pulling back from my cousin's influence. But halfway through our appetizers, his phone buzzed with a message that made his face light up. She did it, he said, grinning at his screen. Who did what? Your cousin. She got me a meeting with Harrison Industries. Do you know what this means? I didn't. But I had a sinking feeling I was about to find out. Harrison Industries is one of the biggest consulting contracts on the East Coast. They've been looking for a strategic planning partner for their expansion into emerging markets. He was talking faster now, animated in a way I hadn't seen in months. Your cousin's ex-husband used to work with their CEO. She reached out personally and vouched for me. She vouched for you? She barely knows your work. She knows enough. We've been going over my portfolio, my case studies, my 5-year projections. He paused, noticing my expression. What's wrong? This is good news, Zoe. This could change everything for me. How often have you been talking to her about your portfolio? I don't know. Every day, I guess. She's been incredibly helpful with strategy and presentation. Every day. While I'd been working late trying to give him space to focus on his business, he'd been spending hours each day sharing his dreams and ambitions with the woman who'd made a sport of destroying my happiness. Oliver, doesn't it strike you as strange that she's suddenly so invested in your success? Maybe she just wants to help family, he said. But he was already looking back at his phone, typing a response. We're not family. She's my cousin, not yours. Well, maybe she wants to help because you're important to me. The words should have been reassuring, but the way he said them, distracted, automatic, made them feel hollow. Over the next week, Oliver threw himself into preparing for the Harrison Industries meeting with an intensity that bordered on obsession. My cousin was his constant companion in this effort, available at all hours to review presentations, suggest revisions, and boost his confidence. She really understands the corporate mindset, he told me one evening as he practiced his pitch. She knows how these people think, what they want to hear. And what do they want to hear? Vision. Innovation. Someone who's not afraid to think big and take risks. I listened to him rehearse the same presentation 3 times, each iteration sounding more like something my cousin would say and less like something Oliver would naturally express. She was reshaping not just his business approach, but his entire professional identity. The night before the meeting, she called to wish him luck. I could hear her voice through the phone from across the room, warm, encouraging, confident. You're going to be amazing tomorrow, she said. Just remember what we talked about regarding the quarterly projections, and don't undersell your international capabilities. International capabilities? Oliver had never worked internationally, but somehow, in the span of 3 weeks, my cousin had convinced him he was ready for global consulting contracts. After he hung up, Oliver seemed nervous for the first time. What if I can't deliver on what I'm promising? Maybe you shouldn't promise things you can't deliver. That's not how business works, Zoe. Sometimes you have to stretch to reach the next level. And if you fall, then I fall. But at least I tried. He was right, of course. Ambition required risk. But I couldn't shake the feeling that my cousin wasn't pushing him toward success. She was pushing him toward dependence. Every opportunity she created, every contact she provided, every piece of advice she offered made him more reliant on her judgment and less confident in his own. The Harrison meeting went well. Too well, perhaps. Oliver came home that evening more excited than I'd ever seen him. They want to move forward, he said, spinning me around the kitchen. Not just with one project, but with a whole package deal. Your cousin was right. They're looking for someone who can handle multiple markets simultaneously. That's wonderful, I said, trying to match his enthusiasm. There's just one thing, he continued, his smile faltering slightly. They want to meet with your cousin directly. They're interested in her consulting on the cultural adaptation components. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means she'd be working with me on this. As a partner, essentially. A partner. She'd managed to insert herself not just into his decision-making process, but into his actual business. She'd become indispensable to his biggest opportunity, ensuring that he couldn't succeed without her. Oliver, do you see what's happening here? What do you mean? She's making herself essential to your career. Every success you have will be tied to her. Every decision you make will require her input. You're being paranoid again. Am I? Or am I seeing clearly for the first time? But Oliver was already back on his phone, texting her the good news. And I realized that somewhere in the past month, I'd lost him completely. Not to another woman, but to the promise of a bigger, better version of himself that only she could deliver. The trap was complete. Oliver left for his first business trip with Harrison Industries on a Monday morning in March. What was supposed to be a 3-day trip to assess potential markets in the Southeast turned into a week-long expedition that somehow required my cousin's constant presence. She knows the regional demographics better than anyone, Oliver explained during our first video call that evening. Harrison specifically requested her input on cultural integration strategies. Behind him, I could see her in what appeared to be a hotel business center, papers spread across a conference table, looking every bit the successful consultant she'd reinvented herself to be. "Hi, Zoe," she called out, waving at the camera with false cheerfulness. "We're just wrapping up our analysis of the Atlanta market. Oliver's ideas are so innovative." Our call lasted 10 minutes. Her voice in the background lasted the entire time. By Wednesday, I'd stopped expecting evening calls. When Oliver did call, it was during lunch breaks or early morning coffee runs, brief conversations squeezed between meetings and strategy sessions. My cousin was always somewhere in the frame. At the next table, in the hotel lobby, walking beside him as he talked. "How's the trip going?" I asked during one particularly short call. "Really well. Your cousin has been incredible. She set up meetings with 3 potential client bases I never would have considered." "That's great." I tried to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "When are you coming home?" "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. We're getting such good feedback here that Harrison wants us to extend the trip through the weekend. Maybe even into next week." "Us?" "The consulting team. Your cousin and me." The consulting team. They'd become a unit, a professional partnership that apparently worked so seamlessly that Harrison Industries wanted to extend their collaboration indefinitely. "Oliver, you've been gone for 3 days. We had dinner plans this weekend." "I know, and I'm sorry. But this is the opportunity we've been working toward. I can't walk away now." "We." He said we, but he meant him and my cousin. I'd become a third party in my own relationship. The extended trip became 2 weeks. Then 3. Oliver would call sporadically, usually with updates about their successes. New clients secured, contracts signed, expansion plans approved. My cousin had successfully positioned herself not just as his business partner, but as the architect of his professional transformation. "The Harrison people love her," Oliver told me during one of our increasingly rare conversations. "She's so polished, so strategic. She really knows how to present ideas in a way that gets results." "And what about us? What about our relationship?" "What do you mean?" "I mean you've been gone for 3 weeks. Oliver, you call maybe every other day, and when you do, it's to tell me about business meetings and client presentations. When was the last time we talked about anything personal?" There was a long pause. "I'm building something here, Zoe. This is bigger than anything I've ever done before. With her. With Harrison Industries. Your cousin is just..." She's a valuable team member. Team member. That's what I'd been reduced to in his mind. Someone who wasn't on the team, who didn't understand the bigger picture, who was somehow holding him back from his full potential. When he finally came home, it was for exactly one day. He needed to pack different clothes, pick up some documents, and prepare for the next phase of the project, which would take him to potential markets on the West Coast. How long this time? I asked, watching him fold shirts I'd given him for Christmas into his suitcase. A month, maybe 2. It depends on how quickly we can establish the regional offices. We? The Harrison consulting team. He wouldn't even say her name anymore. She'd become so integrated into his professional identity that referencing her directly felt redundant. That night, as Oliver slept beside me for the first time in weeks, I lay awake thinking about how completely she'd won. She hadn't seduced him with flirtation or sexual appeal. She'd done something far more sophisticated. She'd become essential to his dreams. Every success he achieved would be tied to her. Every ambitious goal would require her expertise. When he left the next morning, kissing me goodbye with the distracted affection of someone whose mind was already elsewhere, I realized I was living with a stranger. The man I'd fallen in love with had been replaced by someone whose entire sense of self-worth depended on my cousin's validation and support. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "How's Oliver's business trip going? Your cousin posted some lovely photos from their client dinner last night. They look like such a professional team." I didn't respond. What was there to say? That she was right? That they did look like a perfect team? That somewhere between helping him achieve his dreams and supporting his ambitions, my cousin had managed to steal another boyfriend without him even realizing he was being stolen? The worst part was that I couldn't even blame Oliver entirely. She'd given him everything he wanted professionally while I'd been focused on our relationship. She'd made him successful while I'd been trying to make him happy. And in the end, success had proven more seductive than happiness. I was losing him one business meeting at a time. The mistake that changed everything happened on a Thursday evening in April. Oliver had been gone for 6 weeks. Our conversations had dwindled to brief text exchanges, and the occasional video call dominated by business updates. I was tired, frustrated, and desperate for any connection to the situation that was slowly destroying my relationship. I meant to call my cousin directly. Instead, I somehow dialed her ex-husband's number. "Hello?" The voice was deeper than I expected, tinged with confusion at receiving a call from someone whose number he didn't recognize. "Oh, I'm sorry, I was trying to reach—" "Wait, you're Zoe, aren't you? My ex-wife's cousin?" There was something in his tone that made me pause. Not warmth. Exactly. But recognition mixed with something that sounded almost like sympathy. "Yes, that's right. I was trying to call her, but I must have mixed up the numbers." "Don't hang up," he said quickly. "Actually, I'm glad you called. I've been wanting to talk to someone from her family." "About what?" "About what she's really up to these days. With this business consulting thing." My heart started beating faster. "What do you mean?" "Look, I don't know you well, but I know her. And I know she doesn't give a damn about anyone's business success unless there's something in it for her personally." He paused. "She's been posting all these photos on social media, traveling around the country with some guy, talking about their professional partnership. But the captions, they read like she's trying to make someone jealous." "Someone like who? Someone like you?" "I'm guessing." She always did get a kick out of stirring up family drama. The conversation lasted 20 minutes. Her ex-husband told me things I'd suspected but never confirmed. How she'd always needed to be the center of attention. How she'd sabotaged his relationships with friends and family. How she'd used his business connections not to help him succeed, but to control him. "She doesn't want your boyfriend, Zoe. She wants to prove she can take him. There's a difference." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment staring at the phone, processing what I'd learned. My cousin wasn't building a business partnership with Oliver. She was building a dependency. And once he was completely reliant on her professionally, she'd destroy him the same way she'd destroyed every other man who'd gotten too close to something she wanted. I was still sitting there when my door opened and my cousin walked in, clearly intoxicated and angrier than I'd ever seen her. "You called him," she said without preamble. "My ex-husband, he told me. I was trying to call you." "Bullshit." She dropped her purse and faced me with the kind of cold fury that comes with too much wine and too much truth. "You wanted to know what I was really doing with your precious Oliver. And what are you really doing?" She laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "What I always do, cousin. What I've always done better than you. Which is? Taking what you want and making it mine. The mask of professionalism, of family loyalty, of helpful concern dropped completely. You think I give a damn about Harrison Industries? About Oliver's little consulting dreams? I'm doing this because you actually thought you could keep him away from me. He's not a game. Everything's a game. Zoe. And you always lose. She moved closer, swaying slightly, but maintaining that predatory confidence that had terrified me since childhood. You want to know the truth? I could have had him the first day I walked into your apartment. Could have seduced him right there on your couch while you were at work. But that would have been too easy. Too quick. I wanted you to watch it happen slowly. I wanted you to see exactly how little you mean to him when someone better comes along. You're sick. I'm successful. There's a difference. She pulled out her phone and showed me the screen. Photos from their latest business trip. The two of them at client dinners, hotel lobbies, conference rooms. Look at these pictures, Zoe. Really look at them. He's happier with me in 3 months than he ever was with you in 6. The photos were devastating not because they were romantic, but because they showed exactly what she'd said. Oliver looking energized, confident, fulfilled in a way I'd never managed to inspire. He thinks he needs me for business, she continued. But pretty soon he'll realize he just needs me, period. That's when Oliver walked in. He'd come home early, planning to surprise me with a weekend together before his next trip. Instead, he walked into a scene that laid bare everything that had been happening behind his back. My cousin's expression changed instantly, the drunken honesty replaced by calculating damage control. But it was too late. Oliver had heard enough to understand exactly what kind of game he'd been drawn into. How long have you been standing there? She asked, her voice suddenly small. Long enough, Oliver said quietly. His face was pale, his expression unreadable. For the first time in my life, I watched my cousin struggle to regain control of a situation. She tried charm, then explanation, then indignation, but nothing worked. The truth was out, and even her considerable skills couldn't put it back in the box. Oliver looked at me, then at her, then back at me again. I need to think, he said finally, and walked out of the apartment. My cousin left without another word, and I was alone with the wreckage of everything I'd tried so hard to protect. Oliver didn't come home that night, or the next. When he finally returned on Saturday afternoon, he moved through our apartment like a stranger, packing clothes and documents with mechanical efficiency. He wouldn't look at me directly, wouldn't engage in conversation beyond practical necessities. Where are you going? I asked, watching him fold shirts into his suitcase. Hotel downtown. I need space to think. Oliver, we should talk about what happened. What's there to talk about? His voice was flat, emotionless. Your cousin played me, and I let her. End of story. That's not the end of the story. That's the beginning of us figuring this out together. He stopped packing and finally looked at me. His eyes held something I'd never seen before. Not anger, but disappointment so profound it felt like a physical blow. Zoe, she didn't just manipulate me professionally. She made me question everything about our relationship. Every conversation I had with her was designed to make me feel like I was settling for less, like I deserved better, like you were holding me back from my potential. But you know that's not true, do I? He sat heavily on the bed. For 3 months, I felt more excited about my future than I ever had before. More confident, more ambitious, more alive. And it was all built on a lie designed to hurt you. The worst part was that I could see his point. My cousin hadn't just stolen him. She'd given him a version of himself that felt bigger, stronger, more successful than the man who'd been content with our quiet relationship. So what happens now? Now I have to figure out who I actually am when I'm not being manipulated by someone with an agenda. He closed his suitcase. And I can't do that here. Over the next 2 weeks, Oliver became a ghost in my life. He'd text occasionally, brief, polite messages about picking up mail or retrieving belongings. But the man who'd once called me during lunch breaks just to hear my voice had vanished completely. I tried reaching out, suggesting coffee dates or dinner conversations. Each attempt was met with the same response. He needed more time, more space, more distance from the situation that had consumed his life for months. The irony was devastating. My cousin had succeeded in destroying our relationship without even keeping him for herself. Her drunken confession had exposed her game, but the damage was already done. Oliver couldn't separate his feelings for me from his humiliation at being manipulated, and I couldn't compete with the memory of how powerful she'd made him feel. I think we should meet his parents, I suggested during one of our rare phone calls, grasping for anything that might reconnect us to what we'd had before she'd entered our lives. That's not a good idea right now. Why not? We've been together for 8 months. It feels like the natural next step. Zoe, There was something final in his tone that made my stomach drop. I don't think there are going to be any next steps. The conversation I'd been dreading finally came on a Tuesday evening in May. Oliver called while I was making dinner for one, going through the motions of normal life while waiting for a resolution that was never going to come. "I've been offered a position in Seattle," he said without preamble. "Seattle? It's with a firm that specializes in international consulting. Nothing to do with Harrison Industries or anyone associated with that situation. Anyone associated with that situation." He couldn't even say my cousin's name anymore. "When?" "I leave next week." "Oliver, you don't have to move across the country to get away from her." "I'm not moving to get away from her. I'm moving to get away from the person I became when I was with her. And unfortunately, that includes getting away from you." The words hung in the air between us, final and irreversible. "So that's it? 8 months together and you're just going to disappear?" What we had was real, Zoe. But it got poisoned by something bigger than both of us. And I don't know how to fix that. Every time I look at you, I'm reminded of how easily I was manipulated, how quickly I abandoned what we had for the promise of something better. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it? She didn't force me to prioritize business over our relationship. She didn't make me ignore your concerns or dismiss your feelings. She just showed me what I wanted, and I chose it over you. There was nothing I could say to that because it was true. My cousin had been the catalyst, but Oliver had made his own choices every step of the way. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen surrounded by the remnants of the life we'd built together. His coffee mug still in the dish drainer, his favorite cereal still in the pantry, his spare phone charger still plugged in beside the bed. My cousin had won again, but this time, the victory was hollow. She'd destroyed what we had, but she hadn't gained anything in return except the satisfaction of proving once more that she could take whatever she wanted from me. I was alone, but for the first time, so was she. 3 weeks after Oliver left for Seattle, I was sitting alone in Morrison's Cafe downtown, staring at an untouched latte and trying to summon the energy to face another day. The cafe had become my refuge, a place where I could disappear into the background noise of other people's conversations and avoid the oppressive silence of my empty apartment. "Excuse me, but you look like you could use this more than I can." I looked up to find a man standing beside my table, holding out a small wrapped chocolate. He was probably in his early 30s, with kind eyes and the sort of genuine smile that made you immediately trust him. "I'm sorry?" "The chocolate. It's from the bakery next door. Supposedly the best thing they make. You just look like you're having the kind of day that calls for emergency chocolate." Despite everything, I found myself almost smiling. That obvious? Huh? I'm something of an expert in recognizing when someone needs a pick-me-up. May I? He gestured to the empty chair across from me. I nodded, grateful for any distraction from my own thoughts. He sat down and extended his hand. "I'm Alex. Zoe." I unwrapped the chocolate, which was indeed exceptional. "Thank you. You're right. It's been a rough few weeks. Want to talk about it?" Sometimes it helps to tell a stranger. There was something genuinely compassionate about him. None of the performative concern I'd grown accustomed to from well-meaning friends and family. Before I knew it, I was telling him everything. About Oliver, about my cousin, about the systematic destruction of yet another relationship I'd actually cared about. Alex listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions that showed he was really hearing what I was saying. For the first time in months, I felt like someone understood the complexity of what I'd been through. "Your cousin sounds like a piece of work," he said when I finished. "But honestly, it sounds like your boyfriend wasn't strong enough for you anyway." "That's kind of you to say." "I'm not being kind. I'm being honest. Anyone who can be manipulated that easily, who can throw away a good relationship for the promise of professional advancement, you're better off without him." We talked for another hour about everything except my relationship drama. Alex was funny, intelligent, and refreshingly direct. He ran his own marketing consultancy, had traveled extensively, and shared my love of old movies and terrible reality TV shows. For the first time in weeks, I found myself laughing. "Zoe?" The voice behind me made my blood run cold. I turned to find my cousin standing there. But she looked different somehow. Less polished, less confident. Almost nervous. "Hi," I said carefully. "I didn't expect to see you here." But my cousin wasn't looking at me. She was staring at Alex with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Something that looked almost like fear. "Hello, Rebecca," Alex said quietly, his entire demeanor changing. The warmth disappeared from his voice, replaced by something cold and distant. I didn't know you were back in town," my cousin said, and I realized she was actually stammering. Rebecca, who had never been caught off guard by anything in her entire life, was completely flustered. I've been back for a few months, Alex replied. Not that it matters. The tension between them was so thick I could practically touch it. My cousin, Rebecca, apparently, looked like she wanted to flee, but also like she couldn't bear to leave without saying something. Alex, I don't. His voice was firm but not angry, just final. We have nothing to discuss. But Rebecca, we have nothing to discuss, he repeated, turning back to me as if she wasn't there. For the first time in my entire life, I watched my cousin retreat. She stood there for another moment, clearly struggling with the unprecedented experience of being dismissed, then turned and walked away without another word. I stared after her, stunned. Well, Alex said, taking a sip of his coffee as if nothing had happened. That was unexpected. You know my cousin? Used to. A long time ago. He looked at me with a mixture of amusement and something else I couldn't identify. I take it she didn't mention me? Should she have? Probably not. Ancient history and all that. But there was something in his eyes that suggested it wasn't quite as ancient as he was pretending. Alex, what just happened here? He was quiet for a moment, studying my face. Let's just say your cousin and I have a history. And unlike your ex-boyfriend, I learned a long time ago that some people aren't worth the trouble they cause. What kind of history? The kind that taught me everything I need to know about women who make a sport of hurting other people. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand gently. But that's a story for another day. Right now, I'm more interested in making sure you're okay. As we left the cafe together, I couldn't stop thinking about the look on my cousin's face. For the first time in my life, I'd seen her completely out of control, completely powerless. And somehow, that felt like the beginning of something new. Alex and I met for coffee again the following week. This time, I was the one who suggested it. I've been thinking about what happened at Morrison's, I said as we settled into a corner booth at a different cafe across town. About you and my cousin. I figured you might be. Will you tell me about it? Alex was quiet for a long moment, stirring sugar into his coffee with deliberate precision. We dated in high school. For about 2 years, actually. Seriously? Dead serious. She was Rebecca Martinez then. Hadn't married into the fancy surname yet. We were both ambitious kids from working-class families, making big plans for the future. I tried to picture my polished, sophisticated cousin as a teenager with big dreams and a working-class background. It didn't compute with the woman who'd spent the last decade living off her ex-husband's alimony. What happened? What always happens with Rebecca. Someone better came along. Alex's voice was matter-of-fact, but I caught the hint of old pain underneath. Senior year, she met this guy whose father owned a construction company. Nothing glamorous, but steady money and good prospects. She decided I was a risk she couldn't afford to take. She left you for her ex-husband? Bingo. Dropped me 2 weeks before prom to go with him instead. Spent the rest of senior year making sure everyone knew she'd upgraded. The cruelty was so typically Rebecca that I almost laughed. Instead, I felt a surge of anger on behalf of the 18-year-old boy who'd been discarded like an outdated accessory. I'm sorry. That must have been devastating. At the time? Yes. Now? He shrugged. Best thing that ever happened to me. Taught me early that some people will always choose security over authenticity, status over substance. Saved me from making the same mistake twice. Is that why you were so cold to her at Morrison's? I wasn't cold. I was indifferent. There's a difference. Alex leaned back in his chair. Rebecca only has power over people who want something from her. The moment you stop caring what she thinks or what she can offer, she becomes irrelevant. Over the next few weeks, Alex and I fell into an easy friendship. We'd meet for coffee, go to movies, take long walks through the city. He was everything Oliver hadn't been. Present, attentive, genuinely interested in who I was rather than who I could help him become. What I didn't expect was how much my friendship with Alex would affect my cousin. She started showing up everywhere we went. If we were at Morrison's, she'd arrive 10 minutes later. If we went to the art museum on Saturday, she'd be there on Sunday, posting photos on social media of herself, enjoying the same exhibits. If Alex mentioned liking a particular restaurant, she'd check in there the next day. She's following us, I told Alex after the 4th suspicious encounter in 2 weeks. I noticed. Doesn't it bother you? Not particularly. She's not following us, Zoe. She's following me, and frankly, it's kind of pathetic. He was right. My cousin's behavior had taken on a desperate quality I'd never seen before. Gone was the cool confidence, the calculated manipulation. Instead, she seemed genuinely panicked by Alex's complete lack of interest in her. The situation came to a head during our 6th week of friendship. Alex and I were having dinner at a small Italian place when my cousin appeared at our table, uninvited and visibly determined. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, already pulling out a chair. "Actually, we do mind," Alex said calmly, not looking up from his pasta. "I was hoping we could talk, clear the air." "The air is perfectly clear." "Alex, please. We have history. That has to count for something." Finally, he looked at her directly. "You're right. We do have history. You chose someone else because he had better financial prospects, then spent the next 15 years proving that you made decisions based on what people could do for you, rather than who they actually were. That history is exactly why we have nothing to talk about now." My cousin's face flushed. "That's not fair. We were kids. People change. Some people change. You became more of who you always were. I made mistakes. You made choices. And now I'm making mine." Alex turned back to his dinner. "Enjoy your evening, Rebecca." She sat there for another moment, clearly struggling with the unfamiliar experience of being dismissed. Then she stood abruptly and left without another word. "Wow," I said after she was gone. "Sorry about that. I probably should have handled it more diplomatically." "Are you kidding? That was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." I realized I was grinning. No one has ever been immune to her before. No one has ever just not cared. "It's not that I don't care," Alex corrected. "It's that I learned a long time ago that caring about Rebecca's opinion is a waste of emotional energy. She only respects people she can't manipulate, and she only wants what she can't have." Is that what this is? She wants you because you don't want her? Probably. But that's her problem, not mine. As we walked back to my apartment that evening, I found myself seeing my cousin differently for the first time. Not as an all-powerful force of destruction, but as a person whose entire sense of self-worth depended on other people's validation. Alex's indifference wasn't cruel. It was liberating. It showed me that her power was an illusion that only worked on people who chose to give it to her. "Thank you," I said as we reached my building. "For what?" "For showing me that she's not actually invincible." Alex smiled. "She never was, Zoe. She just convinced everyone, including you, that she was." For the first time since Oliver had left, I felt something like hope. Something shifted in me after that dinner. Maybe it was seeing my cousin powerless for the first time, or maybe it was Alex's quiet confidence rubbing off on me. Whatever it was, I decided to stop letting other people's drama define my life. I threw myself into work with an intensity I'd never had before. For years, I'd coasted at my job at a mid-sized marketing firm, doing good work but never pushing for more responsibility or recognition. I'd been too focused on my relationships, too worried about other people's opinions, too afraid of standing out in case it made me a target. But watching Alex dismiss my cousin's manipulation so effortlessly had shown me something important. The only power other people had over me was the power I gave them. "I want to pitch the Hartwell expansion project," I told my supervisor during our monthly meeting in June. "That's a pretty big undertaking for someone at your level." Which is exactly why I should be the one to do it. I have fresh perspective and enough experience to execute well. My supervisor looked surprised. In 3 years at the company, I'd never volunteered for high-profile projects or pushed for advancement. I'd been content to do my assigned work and go home. "What's changed, Zoe?" "I have. I spent the next month developing a comprehensive strategy for expanding our services into the nonprofit sector. It required research, market analysis, and the kind of strategic thinking I'd never challenged myself to do before. But for the first time in my career, I was genuinely excited about something I was creating. Alex helped, not by doing the work for me, but by asking the right questions and encouraging me to trust my instincts. "You're really good at this," he said one evening as we reviewed my presentation over Chinese takeout in my apartment. "I'm surprised by how much I'm enjoying it." "Why surprised?" "I guess I never thought of myself as particularly ambitious." "Maybe you just never had the space to be ambitious before." He was right. Between managing my cousin's interference and trying to maintain relationships that were constantly under attack, I'd never had the mental or emotional energy to focus on my own goals. The Hartwell presentation went better than I'd dared to hope. Not only did my supervisor approve the project, but the partners were so impressed that they offered me a promotion to senior account manager with the responsibility of leading the entire nonprofit division. "This is incredible," I called Alex immediately after the meeting. "They're giving me a team, a budget, everything. Congratulations, but I'm not surprised. You've been working toward this for months." "I've been working toward this for years without realizing it." That weekend, Alex and I celebrated at a rooftop bar downtown. As we watched the sunset over the city, I felt more like myself than I had in years. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "How did you know? When we met at Morrison's, how did you know I needed someone to believe in me?" Alex was quiet for a moment. "Because I recognized the look. It's the same look I had when Rebecca discarded me senior year. Like you were questioning everything about yourself instead of questioning the people who made you feel that way. And how did you get past it? Time, success, and learning to choose people who saw my potential instead of people who saw my vulnerabilities." Over the next few weeks, my cousin's attempts to regain relevance became increasingly desperate. She started calling me directly, something she hadn't done in years, wanting to catch up and hear about my new job. When I didn't return her calls, she showed up at my office. "I heard about your promotion," she said, appearing at my desk one afternoon. "Congratulations." "Thank you." I didn't look up from my computer. "I was hoping we could have lunch. Talk about some opportunities I might be able to connect you with." The old me would have been tempted. The promise of connections, of advancement, of validation from someone whose approval I'd always craved. But the new me recognized the pattern immediately. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm pretty busy with my new responsibilities. I understand you've been spending time with Alex." There it was. The real reason for her visit. "I've been spending time with a friend, yes. Zoe, I know you're probably still upset about the Oliver situation, but I hope you realize that Alex he's not the man he appears to be." I finally looked up at her. "And what kind of man does he appear to be? Successful, stable, someone you can count on, and he's not those things?" My cousin shifted uncomfortably. "He's complicated. Our history is complicated. Your history is that you chose someone else because you thought he had better prospects, and now you can't stand that he's successful without needing you." The words hung between us, and for a moment, I saw something like recognition flash across her face. "That's not what happened, isn't it?" She left without answering, and I realized something profound had shifted. For the first time in our entire relationship, I had been the one in control of the conversation. I had been the one who saw through the manipulation and called it out directly. That evening, Alex and I had dinner at his apartment for the first time. It was a beautiful space, modern but warm, filled with art and books and the kind of thoughtful details that spoke to someone who'd built a life rather than simply acquired one. "This is lovely," I said, looking around. "Thanks. I bought it last year after my company went international." International? We opened offices in London and Toronto. Nothing huge, but growing steadily. I realized how little we'd talked about his work, how much our conversations had focused on everything else. Unlike Oliver, Alex never seemed to need external validation for his success. "I've been so focused on my own career stuff that I never asked much about yours. I prefer it that way. Honestly. Success is more meaningful when it doesn't require an audience." As we cooked dinner together, I found myself thinking about how different this felt from any relationship I'd ever had. There was no competition, no insecurity, no need to prove anything to anyone. Just two people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. "Your cousin came to see me yesterday," Alex said casually as we sat down to eat. "At my office. She wanted to discuss mutual business opportunities." I laughed despite myself. "Let me guess. She has connections that could help your international expansion?" "Something like that." She seemed surprised when I told her I wasn't interested in shortcuts. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That I'd rather succeed slowly on my own terms than quickly on someone else's." It was such a simple philosophy, but it represented everything my cousin had never understood about building a genuine life versus building an impressive facade. For the first time, I was with someone who valued authenticity over advancement, and it was changing everything about how I saw myself and what I wanted from the future. The confession came on a Thursday evening in August, 3 months after we'd met at Morrison's Cafe. Alex and I were walking through the botanical gardens downtown, something that had become our weekly tradition. The summer air was warm and heavy with the scent of blooming jasmine, and for once we weren't talking about work or my cousin or anything complicated, just enjoying each other's company in comfortable silence. "Zoe," Alex said as we stopped beside the fountain at the center of the garden, "there's something I need to tell you." Something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. He seemed nervous, which was unusual for someone who'd always been so steady and sure of himself. "What is it?" "I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between us, simple and honest and completely without pressure. He wasn't asking me to say it back or demanding immediate reciprocation. He was just telling me the truth. "Alex, you don't have to say anything right now," he continued quickly. "I know you're still processing everything that happened with Oliver. still figuring out who you are when you're not defending yourself against other people's manipulation. I just wanted you to know where I stand." I stared at him, overwhelmed by the directness of it. No games, no strategic timing, no hidden agendas. Just a man telling a woman how he felt and giving her space to figure out how she felt in return. "Can I ask you something?" "Why now?" "Why tell me this now?" Alex smiled. "Because hiding it was starting to feel dishonest. And dishonesty is what destroyed every other relationship you've had. I figured if we were going to build something real, it should be based on truth from the beginning." Over the next few weeks, I found myself thinking about Alex's words constantly, not because I felt pressured to respond, but because they'd opened up a space in my mind where I could examine my own feelings without fear or urgency. The truth was, I had been falling in love with him too, but it felt so different from what I'd experienced with Oliver or any of my previous relationships. There was no anxiety, no constant worry about whether I was enough or whether someone better would come along. There was just the steady, growing certainty that this person understood me and valued me exactly as I was. My breakthrough came during a particularly successful week at work. The nonprofit division I was leading had just secured our biggest client yet, and I was feeling more confident and accomplished than ever before. As I sat in my office reviewing contracts and planning strategy sessions, I realized that for the first time in my adult life, I felt complete on my own. That was when I knew I was ready to love someone else. Not from a place of need or insecurity, but from a place of wholeness and choice. I called Alex that evening. "Can you come over? I have something I want to tell you." He arrived with Chinese takeout, and that gentle smile that had first drawn me to him months ago. "So," he said as we settled on my couch with containers of lo mein and sweet and sour chicken. "What's on your mind?" "I love you too." The words came out naturally, without drama or fanfare. Just a simple statement of fact that felt as comfortable as breathing. Alex set down his chopsticks and looked at me with an expression of such genuine happiness that it took my breath away. Yeah. And I wanted to tell you because hiding it was starting to feel dishonest." He laughed and pulled me into his arms. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Our relationship developed slowly and naturally from there. No rush to define things or make grand gestures or prove anything to anyone. We simply enjoyed being together. Whether we were working late at our respective offices, exploring new restaurants, or spending quiet evenings at home reading and talking about our days. The most surprising thing was how little my cousin factored into our happiness. She'd made a few more attempts to insert herself into our lives, showing up at places we frequented, trying to orchestrate accidental encounters. But her behavior had taken on such a desperate quality that it was more sad than threatening. The final encounter came on a Saturday afternoon in September. Alex and I were browsing at the farmer's market when we literally bumped into my cousin near the flower vendors. "Oh, Zoe, Alex, what a surprise." But this time she didn't look manipulative or calculating. She just looked tired. "Hi, Rebecca," Alex said neutrally. "I actually wanted to talk to both of you," she said, surprising me. "I owe you an apology, Zoe." Several apologies, actually. I glanced at Alex, who shrugged as if to say this was my call. What kind of apology? The kind where I admit that I've spent most of our lives being jealous of something I couldn't even name, and taking it out on you in the cruelest ways possible. It was the closest thing to self-awareness I'd ever heard from my cousin. "What changed?" I asked. She looked at Alex, then back at me. Watching someone choose authenticity over opportunity, I guess. Watching you become the person you always could have been if I hadn't spent so much energy trying to prove you weren't good enough. "Rebecca, I'm not asking for forgiveness," she continued. "I don't deserve it. I'm just asking for the chance to stop being the villain in your story." Alex and I exchanged another look. There was no manipulation in her voice, no hidden agenda that I could detect. Just someone who'd finally recognized the cost of her own behavior. "Okay," I said finally. "We can try that." She nodded and walked away without trying to extend the conversation or make it about her needs. For the first time in our entire relationship, she'd said what she needed to say and then given me space to process it. "That was unexpected," Alex said as we watched her disappear into the crowd. "Good unexpected or bad unexpected?" "Just unexpected. How do you feel about it?" I thought about it as we continued walking through the market, Alex's hand warm and steady in mine. Like maybe she's finally figured out what I learned months ago, that other people's happiness isn't a threat to your own. That evening, as Alex and I cooked dinner together in my kitchen, I realized how much my life had changed since that day at Morrison's Cafe. I had work that excited me, a relationship that fulfilled me, and for the first time ever, a cousin who wasn't actively trying to destroy my happiness. Most importantly, I had myself, confident, capable, and finally free from the need for anyone else's validation to feel complete. We got married on a quiet Saturday morning in October, exactly 1 year after Oliver had left for Seattle. It wasn't a grand affair, just us, a justice of the peace, and 2 friends as witnesses in the small courthouse downtown. Alex had suggested something bigger, but I'd wanted something that was entirely ours, free from the performance and drama that had characterized so much of my past. "Are you sure you don't want your family there?" Alex had asked when we were planning. "I want the people who've supported us to be there. That's you, me, Sarah from work, and your business partner, Tom. Everyone else can find out later." We'd planned to tell our families after a quiet honeymoon weekend, but my cousin had other ideas. I was signing the marriage certificate when I heard familiar heels clicking across the courthouse lobby. My heart sank as I looked up to see my cousin striding toward us in a dramatic red dress that was entirely inappropriate for a Tuesday morning courthouse wedding. "I can't believe you didn't tell anyone," she announced, loud enough for everyone in the building to hear. "Your own family had to find out from social media posts." I looked at Alex, confused. We hadn't posted anything on social media. "Sarah posted a photo of us signing the papers," Alex explained quietly. "She tagged you." My cousin was in full performance mode now, drawing attention from court clerks and other couples waiting for their ceremonies. "This is so typical of you, Zoe. Always sneaking around, always hiding things from the family." She turned to Alex with exaggerated concern. "I hope you know what you're getting into." She's always been secretive. But something remarkable happened. Instead of the usual audience of impressed onlookers, people just looked annoyed at the disruption. The courthouse staff continued their work. The other couples waiting for ceremonies ignored her completely. Even the justice of the peace seemed more irritated than impressed by her dramatic entrance. "Rebecca," Alex said calmly, "we chose a small ceremony because that's what we wanted. It wasn't personal. Everything is personal when it comes to family." "Then maybe you should have been the kind of family member who gets invited to important occasions," I said, surprising myself with my directness. My cousin's mouth fell open. She was clearly expecting either apologies or arguments, not calm confidence. "I came here to celebrate with you," she said, her voice losing some of its theatrical quality. "Then celebrate," I replied. "But don't make our wedding about your feelings." For a moment, we all stood there in silence. Then my cousin did something completely unexpected. She laughed. Not her usual calculated laugh designed to regain control, but something that sounded almost genuine. "You know what? Fair enough." She stepped forward and, to my amazement, gave me a proper hug. "Congratulations, Zoe. You found a good one." She turned to Alex and extended her hand. "Take care of her, and thank you for showing me what it looks like when someone chooses authenticity over opportunity." With that, she walked away, leaving us to finish our ceremony in peace. "That was," Alex began. "Different," I finished. "She's really trying to change. Are you okay with her being here?" I thought about it as we posed for photos with Sarah and Tom, as we signed the final paperwork, as we walked out of the courthouse as husband and wife. Actually, yes. It feels right that she witnessed this. She was part of the journey that brought us together, even if she didn't mean to be. Our honeymoon was a weekend in a cabin upstate, quiet, simple, and perfect. We hiked during the day and cooked together in the evenings, talking about our plans for the future and marveling at how different this felt from any relationship either of us had ever had. "No drama," Alex said on our last evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. "No games. No one trying to prove anything to anyone else. Just us. Just us." 6 months later, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. My cousin was getting married again, this time to a man she'd met in a grief counseling group after her father's death. The wedding was small, tasteful, and apparently based on something real rather than strategic. "Are you going?" Alex asked when I showed him the invitation. "I think so. You? If you want me there." The wedding was lovely. My cousin looked genuinely happy in a way I'd never seen before. Not performatively happy or strategically happy, just content. Her new husband was quiet and kind, the sort of person who clearly valued her for who she was rather than what she could do for him. During the reception, she approached Alex and me at our table. "Thank you for coming," she said simply. "Thank you for inviting us. I wanted to tell you both something." She took a breath. "I've been in therapy since last year, working through some things." "How's that going?" I asked. "Hard, but necessary." She looked at Alex. "My therapist helped me understand that I was never actually competing with you, Zoe. I was competing with my own insecurity. You were just the convenient target. I appreciate you telling me that. I also wanted you to know that I'm genuinely happy for you both. You have something real, and that's rare. As Alex and I drove home that evening, I reflected on how much had changed since that day at Morrison's Cafe, when a kind stranger had offered me chocolate and changed the entire trajectory of my life. Oliver had eventually reached out 6 months after our wedding. He was doing well in Seattle, had met someone new, and wanted to apologize for how things had ended between us. I'd accepted his apology and genuinely wished him well. Some relationships end not because anyone is evil, but because people are human and make mistakes when they're confused or scared. My cousin had found her own version of happiness with someone who appreciated her intelligence and drive without needing her to prove her worth through manipulation and control. My mother had eventually adjusted to the idea that I was capable of making good decisions without her guidance or comparisons to other family members. And Alex and I had built something that neither of us had ever experienced before, a relationship based on mutual respect, genuine affection, and the radical idea that love shouldn't require strategy or defense. Looking back, I realized that my cousin's pattern of destruction had been a twisted gift. Each relationship she'd sabotaged had taught me something important about what I didn't want, about the difference between being chosen and being settled for, about the importance of building a life that didn't depend on anyone else's approval or validation. Most importantly, it had taught me that the only person who could really destroy my happiness was me, by accepting treatment I didn't deserve, by staying in situations that diminished me, by believing that I needed to compete for love instead of simply being worthy of it. My cousin had spent years proving she could take whatever she wanted from me, but in the end, the most valuable thing she'd given me was the knowledge that no one could take anything I didn't give them permission to take, and I'd finally learned to stop giving that permission.